We started about a year ago cutting down trees on our property so that we could put a house there. And I can't say how glad I am that we had a chainsaw to do that work. Before I had a chainsaw, we just have a handsaw. And there's a lot of great things you can do with a handsaw, but it's not great for cutting down trees. Imagine if I had a box cutter to cut down those trees. How long do you think it would take for me to cut down one tree with just a box cutter? What if I gave you a box cutter and said, cut down that tree over there? How long do you think it would take you? What if I came to the church and saw someone cutting into the foundation of this church with a box cutter? I might be a little worried about the person themselves and what damage they're going to do, but I wouldn't be worried that the whole church is going to collapse, right? That'd be silly. What if I give you a box cutter and said, take down a whole skyscraper with this box cutter? You'd say, well, that's ridiculous. It would take you years. But it's funny, isn't it, that the TSA are looking for these kinds of things, because back in September 11th, that's exactly what happened. Some people took these and brought down 2 whole skyscrapers in New York City. Something little like this could do so much damage and end so many lives. It's a lesson for us that little things, even though they seem like they're pretty harmless, can be very dangerous. And James is making a point here that we as Christians ought to want to make other people safe. We ought to make this world in some ways better, not worse. That Christians ought to be different. He's talking about, in chapter 2, real faith, and that real faith works. If you have real faith in Christ, that means he's done a change in you, a difference, and that ought to look different. And when that change takes place, there are some things that are obviously going to reflect God in some ways. So he said back in chapter 2, verse 26, for as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. He's going to say in chapter 3, verse 13, who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. So again, on one side, your faith should work and bear fruit. On the other side, your faith should work and bear fruit. And right in the middle is a talk about the tongue. That means that's included. That means that what you say matters as a Christian, and that you should not neglect that part. I mentioned this verse last week, and I'll say it again. It's Proverbs 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. We said last week in talking about the importance of the tongue that our words are important because we will answer for them someday. Be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. We said that our words are important because wrong words can do great damage. And we said our words are important because little things like this can have big impacts. Well, I want to focus on that second point, that our tongue has a tendency not toward the life and the fountain of goodness, but toward the damage and the hurt. And that's why it is important for us as Christians to make sure that we have a handle on what we say and our tongues. Knowing this, what can be done? What principles can we implement into our lives? Principle number 1 is this, that we should very simply know and understand the danger of the tongue. The tongue here in chapter 3 is compared to a fire. Notice he says at the end of verse number 5, and this is why it's important for you to have the Bible open in front of you, looking at it. If you have it on your phone, that's fine, as long as you're not going to flip back and forth to see what's going on in the world. Just stay on the Bible app. Otherwise, grab the Bible there in the pew. I don't know what page it's on, but James chapter 3, verse number 5. At the very end of verse number 5, it says, behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. We all know this. Little fires make big fires. Verse number 6, and the tongue is a fire. So he's saying, I'm not just saying little things turn into big things. He's saying not only that, but the tongue is a fire. Now, a fire can be good. It can provide warmth and comfort. Some of you are looking forward to the cold, if for no other reason than you got a fireplace that you like to sit in front of, and you don't do that in the summertime. So you're kind of looking forward to some fires, or maybe it's warm enough you can sit outside a fire outside, or cool enough you can sit around a fire outside. And there's something really, really wonderful about that. But that's not the kind of fire he's talking about here. He's not talking about the good kind. He's talking about the destructive kind. Yeah, fire is a wonderful thing if it's contained. But if it's uncontained, then it can have real damaging effects. If it's uncontained, then verse number 2 says we could offend. And the word offend means to cause others to stumble in their faith. We could do damage to ourselves, to our church, and to others. I want to talk especially this morning about doing damage with our tongues to the cause of Christ. Because if you claim to be a Christian, as James says in chapter 2, then the world has an expectation of you and the way you talk. That's important. Now, how can we tell how to use our words? Because some people say, okay, well, I'll just stick to positive words. I was thinking about that this week and the last week about, okay, can we come up with like a metric for how we should use our words? So I want you to, in your minds, I was going to put this in a handout in the bulletin, and I just decided not to. Plus, it was late last night. Anyway, think about this matrix here where you think about good words and evil words, and you think of positive words and negative words. So you could have good, positive, good words. What's that? Well, encouragement, praise, thanks, peace. Those are all positive, good words. Then you could have negative good words. Now, doesn't that seem oxymoronic? No. You can have good words that are not positive, but negative. For instance, rebuke. Is that a good thing? Does the Bible tell us to rebuke? Yeah. It's not fun. It's negative, but it's a good thing because you're doing it to help and in love of this other person, to rebuke them, to warn them, even to confess your sins. All those things are negative, but they're good. You should be involved in that. So I'm not saying only positive. In fact, there are some things that are positive that are not right. For instance, what about positive evil words? Boasting. You're saying good things about yourself. It's still wrong. What about flattery? Flattery is lying to someone else, trying to make them think something about themselves for your own personal benefit, lying to them in a way. You're saying good things, or you're saying positive things, but it's evil. Manipulation, gossip, all those things are positive, but they're not good. Now, I think where he is going now is in that one box where we would say negative evil. And that's probably when you think about the way that we use our tongues. If you had to map this out, okay, what are the positive good, positive evil, negative evil? The negative evil box is the one that's the most full. At least that was my experience when I thought about it this week. On this list of what I'm talking about in sinning with our tongues, let me give you my list. And this isn't even my comprehensive list. I narrowed this down. Insults, lies, cursing, complaining, blasphemy, jesting, blaming, slander, taunting, shaming, profanity, spreading discord, sinful criticism, telling secrets, unkind teasing, fear-mongering, sarcasm, threatening, name-calling. There's a long list of ways that we can use our words to hurt other people. If you think about it, there are way more ways to sin against someone with our mouth than there are to help somebody with our mouth. These evils are characterized in 3 ways in verse number 6. Notice them with me. The tongue is a fire, and then he says, first of all, a world of iniquity. A world of iniquity. The best way to understand this is I think that it reflects the world of iniquity. Meaning this, so when we say the world, when the Bible talks about in 1 John, love not the world, he's not saying don't love the earth. He's not saying, don't do your best to recycle and everything like that. He's saying don't love the system of thought that characterizes something that would be secular or satanic. The worldview, the philosophy, the values of that which is against God. That is what he's talking about. The tongue reflects that world. That's the world he's talking about, the world of iniquity. And what we say shows how much influence the world has in us. Have you ever talked to somebody who grew up in a wonderful Christian home and you realize, and maybe you thought, oh, they're a little naive. Now, that's one way to put it. Another way to put it is unspoiled by the world. And that's a wonderful, good thing. I didn't always have that. I was influenced by the world growing up. And, people would tell jokes. And I love now when people tell crass jokes and I don't get it. Like, isn't that a good thing? I don't even understand that reference. And I used to be that I wanted to like at least know what they were referencing so I didn't make a mistake or something. And just like, I don't want the world in my life. And you know if somebody's really worldly, how? Because of the way they talk. The way they talk reflects how much of the world has gotten into them. And can I just warn you that God doesn't want even a little bit of that in our lives? We understand this, I think, most of the time. We say, oh, a little of something is not good. Do you want to let some scammer who calls you on the phone to have a little access to your bank account? Oh, as long as it's a little, it's fine. A little flirtation between my spouse and the coworker is not a big deal. Nobody would say that. A little? There's a little mold in the basement. I'll just let it go and see if it gets any worse. There are little cancer cells in my body that the doctor found. Oh, well, it'll probably go away. No one says that. We all understand. If it's bad and an evil influence, a little is a lot. Or at least it will be very soon if we don't take action about it. And the tongue indicates how little the world has infiltrated your life. It's a world of iniquity. Number 2, it sets on fire the course of nature. It sets on fire the course of nature. And this is an amazing thing to think about. The word course is the word wheel. In the Greek, or revolution. And so as I was thinking about this and looking at some commentaries, trying to understand what does it mean that the tongue sets on fire the course or the wheel of nature. I think what it's talking about is the cycle of human history. The tongue throughout history has been used to start wars and create conflicts, and it influences the way that we treat each other. Growing up and reading history, especially World War II history, I don't know, when I heard that, for instance, 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, I thought to myself, I don't think that there were 6 million SS agents and soldiers there. I mean, there were a lot of German soldiers, but how in the world did they get 6 million Jews to go to these concentration camps and then into the gas chambers? And I just didn't understand it until when the church allowed us to go to Israel. We went to the Holocaust Museum there. And what they do is they have this, imagine a building where it's kind of a V, like this, kind of an A-frame, but instead of going all the way through, which you can see all the way through, they have kind of a winding path through, and they just tell the story of how incrementally the Germans and in Austria and other places, but they just started to little by little ask the Jews for little concessions. We're afraid that there's anti-Semitism. We need you to come into the grotto here, into this one part of the city. We'll protect you if you're here. And we have to know who you are, and so we just need to wear this little star so that we can identify who you are so we can protect you. And then they're in this little city, and obviously there's some things wrong. We say, well, we need to take some of you and take you to another city and another part. And what we're going to do actually is we're going to put you in a place, a camp far away so that you can be protected there instead. And well, there are some people who don't like what's going on and we need you to do something. We'll give you some work to do. Work makes free, it said outside of Auschwitz. Work here and you'll be free. And they brought them into the concentration camps, lie after lie after lie. I read a speech from one of the Jews who was in one of the cities in Poland, who said that the Germans are asking for our children. If we'll give them our children, that will be enough. That's all we have to do is give them our children. Let go of your children. Give me your children, and I'll give them to the Germans, and they'll let us go free. And when that man on the last train into the concentration camp got there, all the people that were there realized how he had facilitated their lies, and they killed him. They beat him to death. How? How did that happen? 6 million people. Lies, just words, promises, slanders, threats, just little by little until all of a sudden a population gone. It doesn't take much. That's the course of nature. Listen, if you know anything about history, if you're like me and you love history, just the more you see it, the more you see it. The more you understand about history, the more you understand how much words and just little things have been used to decimate entire populations with just words. Yes, I understand bullets and all those things, but it was words that made it so that it happened. It sets on fire the whole course of nature. Third, he says, just bluntly, the fires of the tongue were lit in hell. It is set on fire of hell. That's what he says. Just very bluntly, if you want to know where these fires were set, they were set in hell. Satan is behind the false, boasting, harmful words we often use. And a wrong use of our words are pledges of allegiance to hell. I called a pastor that I grew up with once, and as we were talking, he didn't. I must have not introduced myself, but he realized some part of the conversation that I was me and not my dad. He said, "You sound so much like your dad. Wow, your voices are just so similar." He might have said something like this: "You sound like your old man." I'll say this: when you talk in a way that hurts other people, in this category of negative good, you sound like your old man, the devil. You sound like hell. You sound like people in hell. That is what he's saying about the danger of the tongue. Now, if you're not careful, it can, notice he says in verse number 6, so is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body. And I think in one sense it could be your whole life is affected by what just your tongue says, so you yourself could get in trouble with just the way you use your mouth. That's part of it. But I also wonder if he isn't talking about the whole body, meaning the church, that what you say affects your brothers and sisters here. I was wondering if I should say this or not, but as a pastor, I know people that have come, praise God, and have left. And I'm always just careful to ask when people leave, what's going on? If they've just like one Sunday, I don't know. If I don't have contact information, I hope I get to run into them again, whatever. But when people have come for like a year and a half, 2 years, a decade, and then they just drop off, I'm going to go ask them, what happened? What's going on? And can I say that there are people that you would know their names, and they're not here right now. And when I've gone to ask them, what happened? They said, Pastor, it wasn't you. Pastor, it wasn't you. Somebody said something. And I've asked, tell me who. Like, I'll go talk to them gently. I'll go talk to them and say, hey, what's going on? What happened here? So there are people that are not growing in the Lord, and you can say all you want, like we said last week, thin skin, okay, fine, but your words can defile the whole body. You think that what you say doesn't matter to anybody, and absolutely it does, because it's a little fire that can grow. I don't know if there's anybody in this room, because I don't know. They didn't say. Maybe good for them, but I just know that I would hate to think that there's somebody going around in this church saying things that they shouldn't say, acting like their old father, the devil, and doing his work in our church. Because your tongue is not yours. If you're saved, it's God's, it's Christ's. It's being conformed to the image of Christ. And if you profess to be a Christian, then your tongue should reflect that. That's one of the dangers that we have here. Now, if this doesn't get your attention, if James saying that your tongue, when you use it wrong, reflects the very fires of hell, if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know if I can just say anything else. I'll just shut my Bible and be done. Because if that doesn't move you, nothing I'm going to say after this will. But let me just give you that at least, that the tongue has real potential for danger. But I've got a second principle, and it's this. Know and understand that the tongue cannot be tamed. Verses 7 and 8 say this, for every kind of beasts and of birds and of serpents and of things in the sea is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Now, he uses the analogy of wild beasts, and they can't be tamed. And I thought about diving into the rabbit hole of looking at how people have tamed wild beasts throughout the years, and I just didn't have time for it this week. And so I'll just refer generally to the things that you've seen on the internet and otherwise of amazing wild animals that have been tamed either in a circus or for movies. You know, they actually have people that, like when they need snakes and rats, they hire these people to come in with their trained snakes and rats to do these special things on a movie set. Okay, so all of that I think we understand. And you say, I get it, Pastor. So you're saying we should tame our tongues like some of these snakes and elephants and things have been tamed. No. I think I thought that a little while ago. It doesn't say the tongue can't be tamed, so tame it. Does it? No. It says you can't tame it. You cannot tame it. You cannot tame it. All the other kinds of animals, they can be tamed. Your tongue cannot be tamed. So what do? You have to restrain it somehow. You're never going to get your tongue to do the things that you want it to do. So you have to restrain it in some way. If it is an unruly evil and a deadly poison, then what can you do? The word unruly means you can't hold it down. And full of deadly poison, I think, is specific enough. So what do we do? Well, let me just give you a couple things in this realm. And again, this could be a whole sermon in and of itself. I'm just going to go through it really in some ways quickly. If the tongue cannot be tamed, what can we do? First of all, watch what you feed it. We think of dogs as pretty tamed things, right? And you have a tamed dog, and then like we had some friends who had chickens, and they had a dog, and their dog grabbed one of their chickens once, and they shot the dog. You say, well, that seems a little bit like, why would you do that? Well, those of you who have dogs and chickens know, as soon as that dog gets the idea of like, hey, these are edible, well, that's it, right? They're going to get the rest of them. Or at least potentially they're going to get the rest of them. You'd be a fool to say, I'd like to raise chickens, and I'd also like to have a chicken-eating dog around. That doesn't work, right? So watch what you feed it. What you put in is what you get out. Now, any of you who are on social media understand this. It's called the algorithm. It knows the kind of things that you want. And sometimes it'll put something that it doesn't know if you like it or not. But if you spend a little too much time on it or interact with it in some way, it's all of a sudden the algorithm's like, hey, I found something they like. More of this. And I can't tell you the number of things. I'm like, where did I like this post? Where did I do this? I want to get out of this whole thing. I don't want to see this anymore. Like, I don't want to see fiber commercials, or I don't want to see whatever it is, this dumb thing, like stuff I just don't care about. But this is the idea that on social media and on the internet, that everyone is looking at the things that you're interested in, the things that you're kind of hovering around, and they say, that's what we're going to give you. And when you in your mind say, these are the things that are interesting to me, that's what's going to come out of your mouth. You don't have to ask a child, what do you like? Just hang around them for a little while and they'll tell you. The things that they're thinking about is going to come out of their mouth. And little kids don't have like should I say this or not? They're just going to say it. Parents, I'll just tell you this. We know a lot about your family because we have prayer requests. Back in the Sunday school and children's church, any prayer requests, we find out all kinds of things. No, I mean, we pray for you, but it's just, kids don't have that. So whatever's going on in the mind, that's what's coming out. Watch what you feed it, because whatever you're feeding it, whatever your eyes and ears are taking in, that's what's going to come out of the mouth. If you're feeding your eyes and your ears with a love of gossip, your pet tongue is going to bite someone. If you're feeding your eyes and your ears with a lot of nonsense, then your pet tongue is going to have idle and foolish talk. A bunch of nothing coming out. If you're feeding your eyes and your ears with complaints, your pet tongue is going to criticize. If you're feeding your eyes and your ears with wrong media, your pet tongue is going to get involved in swearing and all kinds of worldly things. You can't, so watch what you feed it. 2 is put it in a cage. There are some animals that are just too wild. I mean, James isn't saying that every animal has been tamed or every kind of animal. He's just saying all kinds of animals have been tamed. There are some that you cannot tame. And the tongue happens to be one of those. The only thing you do is put them in a cage. Observe them far away. I know Siegfried and Roy think that they can tame a tiger and take him on the road and do all these things until they find out they can't. Most of the tigers you have to put in a cage. You have to put in an enclosure and look at them from a distance. You don't get to have a petting zoo with tigers. That's not the way that works. What you have to do is you have to put them in a cage. Now think about this. And one of the commentators, I wish I could remember who, I was just kind of reading it casually, and I was like, I don't know about that. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, that's right. So now I don't know who said this. But do you know that God has made a natural cage for your tongue with white bars? You can cage that thing and say nothing. What a wonderful thing to say sometimes. Proverbs 29:11, a fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. Proverbs 17:27, he that hath knowledge spareth his words, and a man of understanding is of an excellent spirit. Zach read this morning, Proverbs 10, verse number 7. 19, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. Proverbs 17:28, and I love this one. Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. You've probably heard it this way. Better to keep your mouth closed and make people feel like you're a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Right? You don't have to say anything. You don't have to say anything. I know that in an age where everyone's clamoring for your attention, you feel like you have to say something. You don't. You don't have to say anything. I read a poem years ago, attributed to W.E. Norris. If your lips would keep from slips, 5 things observe with care. Of whom you speak, to whom you speak, and when, and how, and where. It's an important thing to think about, what you have to say, but if you can't say anything, then don't. Calvin Coolidge said, I've never been hurt by anything I didn't say. Will Rogers said, never miss a good chance to shut up. Now, put it in a cage. Sometimes you have to talk. But you know the Lord's given us a wonderful thing called the conscience. We don't always call it the conscience. Sometimes if you're saved and you're walking with the Lord, it's the Holy Spirit. What do we generally call it? What does our society call it? A filter. A filter. And I have no idea why. I have a little idea why. For some reason, having a filter has turned into this thing that we're not supposed to have. Like it's a virtue to not have a filter. No filter. No. As a Christian has a filter. A Christian has someone who's saying, no, that is not what you're going to say. You are not going to say that. You are going to cage that thought in your mouth. It's not going to come out. Clamp your teeth around that tongue and don't say anything. That's a filter. A filter is a good thing. Psalm 141 verse 3 says this, set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips. Imagine Jesus standing there at your mouth saying, yeah, no, you're not going out. Yep, nope, we're keeping this cage closed. Sometimes the Lord wants you to speak. Sometimes he wants you to sing. It's an amazing thing to see who sings and who doesn't. And I wonder if the people who don't sing, if you just stay quiet the rest of the week, or if you don't sing, but the rest of the week your tongue is just all over the place. Let the cage out then? No, Jesus says this is when you ought to be caged and this is when you ought not. Psalm 31:9, verse number 1, I will take heed to my ways that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me. We talked about that last week, what that means, that idea of a bridle. It is a gate. It is a cage. So you can't tame the tongue. You have to watch what you feed it. You have to put it in a cage. And then finally, you just have to hand it over. You have to hand it over to someone who knows what they're doing with it. Between 2015 and 2019, there were, 48,000 specimens that were handed over to Fish and Wildlife, 129 specimens a day in the United States that were handed over because somebody bought an exotic pet and realized, oh, this isn't a pet. Oh, I can't handle this. Oh, my life and the life of my children is in danger because I was an idiot and got something that wasn't a pet as a pet. Right? Hand it over to someone who knows what they're doing with those wild animals. You cannot handle your own tongue, so give it to Jesus. Learn to say, Christ, is this what you want me to say? Learn to say, God, I do not have the right, loving, good words to say, so you're going to have to speak through me. God, you have to do this because I can't. It's yours. Here's the key. Here's the cage. You let what comes out what wants to come out. And that's the only way to do it. So, second principle here is to know and understand that the tongue cannot be tamed. Finally, here's the principle, and it's also an exhortation. Decide who owns your tongue. American Christians feel that we can have it both ways, that you can say anything and it doesn't matter. But the world knows a Christian tongue when it hears it. The world has expectations for the church that for some strange reason the church doesn't have. And I don't know if it's our love of independence. I could say what I want, First Amendment. And I'm glad for the First Amendment, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that liberty means that we can say whatever, that we should say whatever we want to say, because you're not just a citizen of the United States of America. As a Christian, you're also a citizen of the kingdom of God. which is living right on top of this nation and will one day take over the whole world. And that's a much more important citizenship than just the First Amendment for America. This is not a gray area. There's no gray areas here when it comes to what James has to say. Notice his stark imagery. Verse number 9, therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. There's two illustrations, a fountain and a tree. A fountain cannot spew good and bad water at the same time. A tree cannot grow figs and olives or berries. It can't do that. And so your tongue must belong to one or the other. You can either praise God or you can curse others. But those things should not be happening out of the same Christian mouth. Watch what you say, because your mouth does not belong to you. It belongs to the Lord. Now, what's at issue in all of this? Because what is the tongue? A tongue is a muscle that we've learned to use over time. And you can use a tongue to speak any number of languages and say any number of things. What is really at the issue? As always, it's the heart. It's always, always the heart. Matthew 15, Jesus said this, not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. Do not ye understand that whatsoever things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man? For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, even so a very good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. You cannot claim that your heart is made new if your words are wrong. Now let me just talk real briefly, I think, about swearing. Because sometimes I feel like Christians have all these different ideas about swearing and if that's okay, and especially young people. I remember as a young person thinking, like, who even made all these rules about swearing? And why is it that this word I can't say and this word I can say? I just think this whole thing is silly, and maybe you have some of the same thoughts. And you could even say, cynically, show me a place in the Bible where I can't say this word. And I can't do it because maybe back in the day, even in 1611, that word wasn't a word. And God doesn't want to give us just a list of things that we can and cannot say because it's going to be different for every single culture. But there's almost always, there are words in every single culture that are designated as swear words, that are words that decent people don't say. And it's almost always recognized as apart from good religious talk. In fact, I found this out. The word profane means out of the temple or separate from the temple. Interesting. There's a distinction in every culture. These are not words that people who go to the temple say. These are not words that good people say. I'm not the one that came up with these. I'm saying our society, our culture, and every single culture, go into Greenland and they have Greenland swear words. This isn't a Christian thing. Go to Indonesia. Muslims have words that they say. These are the swear words. These are the words that we, good people, don't say. And in our brains, and this is an interesting thing too, I didn't realize until this week, in our brains, our language is on the left side of the brain. All of the words that we say, but our swear words are stored on the right side of the brain. Totally different place, because they're associated with emotion. That's why I think people say swear words are fine, because, well, I'm just being really emotional. Okay, all right. Just understand that it's not coming from a place where normally we talk. It's coming from a different place. You say, well, how do I figure this out? Well, what our culture thinks about swear words is a good gauge, right? So here's the thing. If on network TV they bleep this out, why should a Christian say, I think it's fine? If the FCC, which is no right-wing religious cult, says, that's a word we don't want little kids to hear. That's a word that shouldn't be in your mouth. we're going to bleep that out. We're going to say we're going to fine you $40,000 if you say that. Then a Christian has no right to say, I think it's fine. Because it doesn't, if the culture is saying this is wrong, there it is. There's a designation there, and they're saying good people don't say this. And if you're a Christian, you're saying, I want to be part of those people, at the very, very least, who is a good person. But let me just talk about it in a slightly different way. Swear words are generally in three categories. There are generally three different categories of what we'd call swear words that have talk about these things. One is sexual intercourse, two is religion, and three is the human body. Think of any swear word, and it's probably going to fall into one of those three categories. And we have words for every single one of those swear words. You can't think of a swear word where there isn't a decent way to talk about that. There isn't a good way to talk about that very same idea. And when you choose to use a swear word, you're saying, no, not that word, this word. It sounds cooler. It sounds better, whatever it is. But there is a word for that. So why is it that you would ever choose this word over here rather than the word that's already been designated in our lexicon for this? I think this way, because when you talk about it in this way, in the way that our dictionary would define it, you're talking about it as something that's serious and important. And when you talk about it in a swear word, you're talking about it in an unserious way. Things that ought to be taken seriously, things that ought to be held up in high regard, things that are important to God even, we're treating very tritely. There's a way to talk about things that should be sacred as just very common. And many of the swear words take things that are God's gifts and make them crass and unimportant. That's part of the problem with swearing, is that it takes the holy and makes it something profane out of the temple. Now, someone can come along and say, I just think it makes you sound unintelligent. No, it really does more than that. It makes you look like you don't take seriously the things that God takes seriously. You're treating things that God says, these are important. These are gifts. These are things that I want you to talk about in important ways and to put them in the common vernacular that makes it seem like these things are things we don't need to really address very well. Ultimately, what comes out of your mouth, again, when you think about this, you have to decide who owns your tongue, and it is what is in your heart. If you have already given your heart to the Lord, then your tongue ought to be his as well. And the point James is making is that you cannot say, my heart belongs to God, but my tongue belongs to the devil. It doesn't work that way. Whatever's down in the roots is going to come out in the fruits. Whatever's down in the spring is going to come out in the fountain. So what's in your heart? A tongue that criticizes comes from a heart that is not content. A tongue that blesses comes from a heart that is thankful. A tongue that flatters comes from a heart that wants to manipulate. A tongue that encourages comes from a heart that loves to encourage. A tongue that boasts comes from a heart that is proud. A tongue that lies comes from a heart that hates the truth and hates those that it speaks to. A tongue that blames comes from a heart that refuses to submit to its own wrongdoing. A tongue that gossips comes from a heart that craves attention and loves dissension. A tongue that talks idly comes from a heart that is not occupied with God. A tongue that complains comes from a heart that is not thankful. We ought to show people the new heart that God gave you when he saved you, and that comes out through your tongue. There's a lot more going on than just your vocabulary. This is a matter of the heart. This is a matter of Christian testimony. This is a matter of the gospel. And so, take it seriously, because the tongue is important, yes, but there's also a danger to the tongue.